First things first, if you haven't already, grab the slides. Probably worth doing. There are a lot of slides. And I think this is going to be a little bit of a whirlwind, to be honest, as far as just introducing you to all the things that Chrome DevTools can do and all the ways you can use it. We're going to start out with some very basic things that I think maybe newer people don't know, but some common use cases for Chrome DevTools and things that people might normally do with it. And then we'll kind of escalate quickly into, I wouldn't call it, I wouldn't say anything we're covering today is advanced, quote unquote, in the sense that anybody here couldn't utilize the tools, but it's just tools that Chrome has built in that many people don't realize exist, and things that can make your life easier. So given we all work in web browsers pretty much every day, it's good to know the tools that you have to work with. So on that note, I'm Micah Wood. You can find me as WP Scholar pretty much everywhere that I am on the internet. Yes, I am a WordPress developer now, engineering manager, but yeah. So starting off, how do we open up Chrome DevTools, right? Simple stuff. So Google does have this little ... menu in the top right, and to be honest, there's a lot of things that kind of fall under that little ... menu. But you can go from there to more tools, to developer tools, and open up developer tools there. To be honest, I never do that. I just right-click on something on the page and hit the inspect button. That takes you into this view right here. So we have this panel that opens up. That is your dev tools. There are a lot of tabs across the top: elements, console, source, network, performance, memory, application, security, lighthouse, and maybe even a few other little tabs on the end there that you don't have right now. So again, we're only covering things that are built in. Some of these slides might be a little bit more dated than others. Some of them have gotten a refresh. Some of them are still the same. So don't be too concerned if you see 2022 on any of these slides somewhere. But so anyway, you can also use keyboard shortcuts, which I often do. So on a Mac, if you do Command-Option-I, it's going to open or close your DevTools. Command-D is also a nice little shortcut. If it's already open, it'll dock it from the side to the bottom or back and forth. So depending on what you're trying to do with it, makes it a little more useful. And then Windows, if you hit F12 or Control-Shift-I, it'll open and close your DevTools as well. Side note on shortcuts, I will mention shortcuts in a few other places. I only mention the Mac shortcuts, so just replace Command with Control and you should be good to go in all other cases. So, all right, so what are the common things that we might need to do in the browser? So obviously, HTML is kind of a common denominator, so we're going to start with that. So a few things here. You can actually, as we said, right-click on any element on the page and hit Inspect, and it'll open up the panel, but it'll also highlight. I don't know if you can see it on the screen or not. It's probably a very light highlight, but it'll actually highlight the element that you have selected. So it very quickly will just take you to the HTML related to the piece of content that you're interested in. Likewise, you can also have the DevTools open. Click the little button in the top left of the panel that's open, and then it gives you the ability to just hover over, and it'll highlight things as you move around. And then when you click it, it'll open that in the panel as well. Whoop, we went backwards. There we go. So once you're in the panel and have selected some sort of HTML element, you can also just use your keyboard if you want to navigate up and down the DOM or inside and out of elements. It kind of works the way you would expect. If you go up, you go to the parent. If you go down, you move to a child or sibling. And left or right will expand or contract your current element. And then we have the ability to search the DOM. So if you You can't just open DevTools and hit Command F. It may require you actually clicking into the HTML section there and then hitting Command F to open up the little tiny search bar, which is often hard to see. But you can search for text, you can search for attributes, you can search for all kinds of things there, and makes it very easy to find what you're looking for. And also, if you want to manipulate an element that you're working with, so again, if you happen to do a lot of CSS or maybe you're, various reasons you might want to edit the HTML. So you'll right-click on the element and you can hit Add Attribute, and it'll let you put in a new attribute onto that element. Likewise, if there's some existing thing, you can just double-click on the attribute that you want to change, and it'll let you change it. And then you can always hit right-click on an element in the Elements panel, and then hit Edit as HTML, and it'll just kind of turn that into like a little text box that you can edit the content of that. So this is great, like for example, maybe you want to change specific content to test different layouts, but you don't want to have to go update your data source to allow you to test a particular view with particular, I don't know, extra long content or something. Can be very easy to do this way. So lesser known things you can do. If you just want to rearrange the DOM a little bit and move things up and down and swap elements and stuff like that, you can just hold Command and F and then hit up or down if you have an element selected, and it will literally bump it up and down the DOM. And so here we could actually reorder search results on Google, but just for us. And that's the other thing, right, is that any of these kinds of changes that you make, obviously they're not going to stick around for the next page load. So these are the kinds of things that you might do if you're just trying to troubleshoot some stuff. You can also duplicate elements. Again, great for testing. If you've got 3 items on a page and you want to see what happens when you have 12 items on a page, you can just duplicate over and over. So you could just right-click on something, hit Duplicate Element. And then likewise, if you realize you just want to get rid of something and see what it looks like without it, you can right-click and delete it altogether. Of course, you could change the style to hidden as well, but sometimes deleting it is a better option for testing. So then there's a lot of stuff we might want to do with CSS, right? So most commonly, we'll highlight an element, and there's this little styles panel that we have here. And it just shows us all of the selectors and things that are in our CSS that actually apply to the highlighted element. So that way you can click, see everything that's going on, and kind of, it also gives you like the file names and the line numbers where those rules are in your CSS. So if you're just trying to figure out what is impacting the current style and where that thing lives, it makes it nice and easy to do that. You can also, if you hover over a particular style, it will give you a little checkbox, and you can check or uncheck those things to enable or disable styles, just to see if a particular style is affecting what you think it's affecting. If you want to edit actual units, so if you've got, I don't know, pixels, rims, ems, all of the things, you can click to edit that, and you can just input whatever you want directly. Often if you're changing from pixels to rims or something like that, you might need to just type it in. But if you're just trying to bump it up and down and see kind of where it lands and what you want, you can actually use your option and the arrow key to increment by 0.1, which is great for rim measurements. You might want to go with shift arrow up and down to kind of get like increments of 10, or you can do command arrow and get increments of 100. So how much you want to move it. And then we have our ability to view the changes that we made in the browser. So this is one that not very many people, I think, are aware of, but it's very useful. So you go into this element or that element and you change some styles in the browser. And again, it doesn't last beyond the current page load, right? So if you reload the page, those things are gone. But you know, I need to take the changes I've made now that I've gotten what I want, and I need to apply them to my style sheet so that they will persist. So how do you know what you changed? I changed 10 elements. What were they? You can actually go to the ... menu, click More Tools, Changes, and then it basically gives you a diff and shows you, hey, these are the elements, styles, things that you've changed. And so that's really helpful. And then if you're looking for something specific, you can always do a search in the styles panel there and type in a particular style or something like width, and it'll narrow it down to specifically anything that has the word width in it. Let's see. So you can expand a property to view all the applicable styles in the computed section. So you see there's kind of in that panel to the right, we have styles, which is the view we were on before where we saw the styles and could toggle things and all that. And in this view, we have the computed styles, which is just telling us, exactly what is being applied, despite maybe having 10 CSS rules and different specificity levels. And so this is going to tell you what's actually being applied. So you can expand in a particular style, like we have font weight here, and when you hover over it, it'll give you this little circle with an arrow. And when you click on that, it will take you to the style that is being applied at the moment for that particular element, despite, again, having multiple rules available. If you jump up, and again, we're back in this styles panel again. If you click on the .cls in the little bar there at the top, it will drop down this little section here where any element you select, it'll give you a checkbox for all of the class names that are assigned to that element. So you can click to unassign or reassign a class, or you can even type new class names in there in order to apply them. If anyone in the room happens to use things like Tailwind, there are some really cool extensions which will do some cool stuff, but even with just the built-in stuff here, you can toggle Tailwind classes, add your own new ones, and see the results. And then we have the ability to add custom rules. So a lot of times, we might manipulate the existing rules, but sometimes we need to create something custom. So the little plus icon up here in the top right in the styles panel is going to give us the ability to add a new custom rule. So we can use whatever selector we want and then add whatever rules we want and see those things applied in the browser. And then we have the ability to edit element dimensions. So again, moving from the styles panel over to the computed styles section. There's this nice little diagram, which, by the way, if you're just trying to figure out, does this element have margin, border, padding, any of those things, it's all highlighted right there and very clear, so you can see what exists. But you can also click on those numbers and edit them and change the dimensions for any of those values as well. So if you need to force the state of an element at any time, so for example, we have this sign-in button up here in the top, and I believe it has different styles, for example, when you hover over it versus when it's just sitting there. So you can actually go into the markup and you can right-click on the element and you can hit force state, and then you can do hover or some of these other states as well. And then that will apply that state, and you can inspect the styles while it's in that state without having to worry about, like, well, when I hover over it, it gets the style, and when I move away, it's gone. So you can keep it there while you're working. The other helpful thing here is a lot of times fonts come into play with design, and you want to make sure you're using the correct fonts. And your easiest way of doing that is to select an element that's supposed to contain whatever font you're expecting. And then when you go into the computed panel and you scroll all the way to the very, very bottom, the rendered font for the element is shown there. So really nice to make sure that you're not seeing a font that's, especially me not being a designer, is close but not what it should be, right? Designers have that special skill of being able to just glance at something and be like, no, that's wrong. So then you can also emulate print media. So if you need a print style sheet, for example, you can go to the ... more tools rendering, and that will pull up this nice little panel. And down here, where this little green box is, you can emulate CSS media types. So you could actually show your print styles on the browser page and manipulate and work with those as well. So now, jumping into JavaScript a little bit. Again, we have a lot of different languages that exist and a lot of different IDEs and tools that exist. But the nice thing about JavaScript and working in the browser is that we basically get kind of like a full IDE of sorts in the browser. So here we're actually able to see debugging in action. And yeah, there are a lot of moving pieces, but if you kind of follow the steps, you can go to your Sources tab, find the page maybe that contains your JavaScript you want to monitor. You can set a breakpoint for a particular line or even part of a line. And then you have your little debug panel off to the right, where it'll show you as you run your debugger and it hits these breakpoints, what is in scope, and a lot of the various things you might need to know as you're debugging. So very handy if you've never used it, and especially if you do anything with JavaScript, which I have a feeling a lot of people here do, then you should definitely take advantage of this. Another thing you run into a lot is you get some JavaScript file that looks like this. It's just one, minified file, and it looks really confusing, like you can't really make heads or tails of it. There's a nice little pretty print icon. It's just two curly braces in the bottom left corner of the panel. And you click that, and it'll clean up your code so that even though it may still be, have some different variable names or things like that, it gets it to a point where you can see the indentation and you can see kind of more what's going on, which is very helpful. Another trick here with the JavaScript console is, a lot of times you want to just run a little test, maybe a little code snippet you want to try in the console to see if something's going to work before you throw it in your actual JavaScript. So you can click on an element, and any element you click on, you have to click on the HTML portion over there. But if you click on it, the Chrome browser will automatically assign that to $0. So you could just type $0 in the console, and that is your current element. So if you click on something else and use $0, then it's another element. So it's nice as a little shortcut, and it works also with your snippets that we'll get into later. So very handy shortcut, and of course you can chain off of that as well, any methods or things that you might need. Snippets, yeah, so snippets are one of those things that, again, is often hidden, or most people don't realize. But, as opposed to trying to run, I don't know, essentially a file worth of JavaScript in the console, you can actually just throw it in a snippet, and the snippet is essentially a file that will hold your code. And if you were to put a snippet in and close your browser, assuming you save it, and then come back later and open it up, that snippet's still there, right? So the snippets are persistent, and you can put any JavaScript you want in there, have it interact with whatever page you happen to have open at the time. There's a lot of interesting and flexible things it can do. And if you're interested in what other people have done, there are entire websites dedicated to snippets that you can throw in your browser to do various things related to SEO or fill in the blank. So definitely worth checking out. Something that I definitely take advantage of. Oh, and yeah, once you put the code in, this is how you run it, right? So you just right-click on the name of the snippet, you hit run, and then it will run your code. So in this case, we have a little snippet that's actually outputting something on the page and throwing something into the console at the same time. So when you're working with responsive design, if you have your DevTools open, you click the little tablet mobile icon up there at the top. That will turn on this mode here, where you can actually see the dimensions of the viewport, and you can see, so any breakpoints that you've actually defined in your CSS will by default be configured on this bar up here. So you can see where it says tablet 768, and you know, it has some built-in ones by default, but it'll also pull in your own breakpoints as well. Or you can just hard code in like, hey, I want to see what it is at this, you know, width. And a lot of times with breakpoints, the thing that I don't think people test very well is what happens if I'm 1 pixel below the breakpoint, 1 pixel at the breakpoint, and 1 pixel above the breakpoint. Because sometimes people use min versus max width, and when you combine the two, you end up with this 1 pixel area where it's just nothing looks right, right? So things like that, that makes it easy to test just by being able to increment with your arrow key the width of the page. And then you can also select a specific device that you want to emulate. So they have kind of all of the common devices. And again, this is an older screenshot, so there are more newer things that will be in Chrome here. But yeah, so you can just kind of pick out of that list. So more exciting, working with requests. So if you open up DevTools, there's a network panel, and you reload your page, and everything that loads on the page, all the requests, meaning your HTML requests, your JavaScript, your CSS, your, you know, all your AJAX calls, fetch calls, third-party Twitter API, whatever you have going on, all of those requests are going to show here. And you can see the status codes, you can see the type of document, you can see the initiator, which sometimes you just need to know, like, hey, I see this JavaScript file being loaded, but I don't know what's loading it. The initiator is basically what's loading it. So if it says index, it's your HTML. If it says anything else, it's some other JavaScript file, most likely. Could be like a Google Tag Manager script or something loading it in. Tells you your size, even if something's been cached in the browser, as well as how long it takes to load, and gives you your whole waterfall here as well. Which I think this is kind of the view that most people who do anything with network requests, they understand that. So the other thing is you can filter by type of request. So in this case, we're filtering by JavaScript, and we're only seeing the JavaScript files that are being loaded for this particular page. You can also filter by status code. So if you, for example, only wanted to see 204 responses, then you could do that, or maybe 404 or 503, whatever your scenario is. You can search by name or path. So, for example, if you're working on a project and you know that it lives in this folder, which has a unique name, you can type in the name of the folder, and it'll just show you what's being loaded from your project as well. And you can filter just by things that have mixed content. So if you're trying to work through some HTTPS type issues or anything like that, very powerful just to be able to filter and find the things that you need. Let's see, so you can also click on any of these items and you can look at the details associated with the request. So here we have a little headers section where it's showing the request and response headers. We have a preview, which is kind of more like a pretty preview, and then we have the response, which I think is just like direct output. And you can also pull up the timing and see the latency of the request and all kinds of various things about it as well. But just a lot of details if you click on a particular network request. Another thing you might want to do while you're testing and working is making sure the cache is disabled. So if you click on the disable cache while you're in the network panel, it will turn off the cache while your DevTool's open. And then another very helpful one, I've seen a lot of people install separate extensions to get this functionality, not realizing that it's actually built into Chrome, is the ability, you can just check the preserve log. And what that does is you can navigate to 3-4 different pages or websites, and all of the data, the network requests, are going to be stored and saved. They're not going to disappear. Because normally, if you load up a page and then you reload the page, it only shows you what happened on that one page load. But if you're trying to, for example, figure out what is the redirect chain associated with me hitting this page and ending up here, 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 and here, like where all is it taking me, you can actually do that just in the browser, which is very useful. Another thing that is very common is you might be working with forms and you want to see the requests, the post request that's being submitted. A lot of times we might be working on the back end or expecting a request to come through and not seeing it. And then we're wondering, well, did it actually submit correctly on the front end? And so you can actually check that by pulling up your network tab, clicking into the actual form submission, which again will probably require that you do a preserve log. But in doing so, you can actually see the form data that's submitted, which includes the information there. So very cool. Also something I don't see or hear of a lot of people doing this, but a simple tool which works well. So another thing, I don't know if anybody's encountered things like pharma hacks or things like that on sites, but a lot of times things will function differently depending on the user agent associated with the request. So if you wanted to see what happens when you load your site as Googlebot versus normal, you can do that. So again, that more tools section, you can go to network conditions and you can actually set your own user agent from the list or create your own. And I think you can even save, if you have some that you need to use over and over, you can actually save them into the browser. So let's say you're doing something and it makes an AJAX or a fetch request, and who knows, maybe you're working on a form and you're trying to submit, but you're trying to make sure that you're handling the request on the other side, but to test it every time you have to fill out a whole form or something like that. Maybe it's 25 fields, who knows. But you can actually just, once a request has been made, you can just right-click on any XHR fetch request, and you should be able to replay it with the replay XHR. And so it will replay that request, so you can actually make it over and over and over again without having to do all the manual actions on the front end of the site to make that happen again. So very good for testing and debugging. You can also click on the little security tab here and get details on the certificate and how long it lasts and when it expires and all that kind of stuff. So if you happen to have any HTTPS issues and need to kind of figure out what's going on, is it using the correct certificate? You can inspect all of those things. So we're getting into a little bit more fun stuff. So working with local files, right? So a lot of us kind of jump between working in our code editor and then jumping to the browser, and then working in our code editor, jumping to the browser. And so what we really can do is bring our local files into the browser and edit them there. And then if we have things like live reloading or whatever else going on with our process, we can actually just stay in one place and work. Now, granted, it's not going to give you the same auto completions and things that you might get, but if you're just trying to like fine tune something or try something out, it's very nice to be able to just make a change and see it on the page. So if you go into your sources panel and click on file system, well, actually, I'm sorry, this is slightly older. It's called workspace now. So if you click on the workspace, that will bring you into this section where you can actually add an entire folder of local content that you can then edit. So great for SCSS or other JavaScript files that are part of a build process. You can change it and watch it build. And you just Command S to save as you work. And then, so we know, for example, that as you're working on a page, if you're manipulating stuff in DevTools, you reload the page, a lot of those CSS and other things, those are gone. But if, for example, you wanted to override and persist any of those changes, you could actually use overrides. And this may not even be a dev-related thing, for example. You might just say, when I go to this website, this thing annoys me and I want it to go away. You can actually just, create an override that just makes that a display none or whatever the case may be. And now every time you go to your website, it doesn't bug you so much. But yeah, so you can use overrides to add your own files that'll just allow you to persist changes. You do have to select a folder where all of your overrides are going to live. So that is something you would have to do. And you do have to click an allow button so that it will let you do it. But once you do, it will persist things. So you can actually make changes in the browser here and have it saved to your overrides so that when you reload, those changes are still there. As per the arrows. You can also temporarily turn overrides off, and you can just delete your overrides after the fact here as well. And then we have recordings. So with recordings, you can go into your ... more tools, and I guess the highlighting is not great here, but there's a recorder option, and you can pull up recorder tab, which is, I think, still labeled as maybe not an experiment anymore, but so it'll give you this panel here where you can click Start a New Recording, and then you assign a name and click the Record button, and then essentially you can perform any actions, which could include going to different websites, clicking on different things, typing into fields, and all of those things are going to be collected into the recording. And that can be downloaded and shared as a JSON file. So for example, if a QA person was testing something and realized there was a bug, and instead of having to write down all of the steps they took to replicate it, they could literally just do a recording and send it to the developer, and the developer could replay it and see the problem and go about the day. So very powerful because anybody can access this and do a recording because all you have to know is how to use the browser. So it's a lot of ideas and things that you can use this for. And then, of course, yeah, you can hit the replay button and it'll just play back everything as well. And then, like I said, you can export these things as JSON. You can export it as a Puppeteer replay script. There's even a Cypress extension. So if you came to my Cypress workshop, you can actually use this Cypress extension to convert the recording into Cypress tests, which you can then use in your test suite. So performance. So we have Lighthouse, which I think many people are aware of. So we have the ability to just do a performance check and then analyze the page. And then it will give us some result like this, which will have our kind of overall score for our metrics on the page, and a lot of the details there about how we can make improvements and specific things that we might need to do to improve the performance. There's also a more experimental performance insights section, which I don't know, it's kind of nice. It's got some different features, different UI, a little easier to use maybe, as opposed to maybe, well, something we're not getting into, which is some other performance, the actual normal performance tab, where it gives you ridiculous amounts of information about painting and all kinds of things. So this will just give you some nice information, be able to click around and actually see kind of how your core web vitals are doing and where those fall, but also clicking in and finding specific elements that are affecting it as well. So kind of nice. And again, it's an experiment, so you may have to go to your Chrome settings. There's an experiment section. You can enable a bunch of different experiments. So again, no slide for that, but there are a lot of experiments there that are probably worth just taking a look at. And accessibility, we can also run an accessibility check with Lighthouse. And of course, that will give us an accessibility audit, and likewise give us all of the things that we might need to address to improve it. But you can also click on an element, and there is an accessibility section. And so if you're just interested in the accessibility tree or the accessibility attributes associated with a particular element, then the accessibility section is a place you should probably check out. So don't know if anybody here does accessibility, but it's good to be able to kind of look at and debug. Let's see. Oh, yeah, along accessibility lines, one of the things you might want to do is make sure that your website works as expected for people who might have vision deficiencies. So people who are colorblind, for example, if you've used certain color palettes and you've put colors next to other colors that basically will blend together with people who have particular vision deficiency, they might not be able to read or see particular content. So important to kind of be able to test some of those things. So you can hit Command-Shift-P, which will pull up this command palette, which has numerous things. And I'm also realizing now that there's a whole nother slide I'd like to put in here about you can do full screenshots of a page, even though the whole page isn't visible, and a lot of other things like that from the command palette. So again, this presentation is just kind of like tip of the iceberg, but if you just know that that is there and you can search for things, you will find a lot of cool stuff. But if you search for Atopia, which is kind of like the suffix for all of the colorblind variations, it'll pull up the emulations for each of those, and you can click through each one and kind of see how that gets applied. So in this case, I don't remember which one got applied, but you can see definitely the Google logo's looking different. Colors have changed. Obviously, Google color scheme should do fine, but something we definitely want to check. The first time I did this, I found the Atopia thing and I clicked it. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I realized I didn't know how to undo it. So very much need the slide in here that tells you how to undo what you just did, because it's a totally separate item in the drop-down, which says do not emulate any vision deficiency. So if you just search for the word vision, you can bring it back. And then we have things like cookies and data and a lot of things that we might have local storage and various things that we use in our applications. So being able to kind of inspect what's there, but also edit things or even delete things for testing purposes. So here we're in the application panel, and you can see the cookies section, and you can expand that out, and it'll show you the URL associated with the site that you're on, and you can click in and see all the different cookies that are assigned. You can see the domain, the path. A lot of times with cookies, you might have a situation where maybe the domain and path aren't quite right, and so it's not applying as you're expecting or things like that. So this will help you debug that, and also let you change the values if you want to see how that impacts your application. Then we have local storage. Very much works the same way. You click it, you can see everything, you can edit stuff, you can delete, you can filter the list by doing a search. So it gives you a lot of control and functionality there so that you can change things for testing. Another thing you might want to do is just clear all the data associated with the site, which could be cookies or cache or local storage or all the things. This will kind of do it all. So you just go to the storage section here, and then there's a clear site data with an optional including third-party cookie checkbox, and that will clear everything out. Then we have some bonus features. So let's say you have this application and you're trying to find a particular thing, but you have no idea what file or where it is. You can go to the More Tools, go to Search, type it in. It searches all the files that have been loaded in the browser, whether that's JavaScript or CSS or HTML or whatever else you're running. It'll find it, and it'll show it all in this one panel. So this is great for just trying to find a particular string somewhere in many, many files. So you can also use Chrome. Actually, this is how you kill a Chrome browser tab. So if you do happen to have a tab that's going astray, locking up, whatever the case may be, you can actually go to the task manager and it'll give you a panel that pops up in the browser, and you can find the browser tab specifically that you want to close. You can click it and then hit the end process button, and that will kill it. But you can also sort by CPU or memory footprint or things like that if you're just interested in seeing how well your browser's performing with the pages you have open. Sometimes things slow down and I realize I've got 3 pages that are running a gig's worth of memory, and closing those down helps. So then we have HAR files. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with HAR files, but yeah, a few people. They're very, very handy. So essentially we have all this rich information in the developer tools panel, and we a lot of times will replicate some weird edge case with a JavaScript error or something, and we want to share that with another developer or something along those lines so that somebody else can help you debug and figure out what's going on. But maybe you work remote and they can't just look over your shoulder, and you don't want to, maybe you have to work async and they can't literally hop on a call. So how do you share that kind of stuff? Well, that's what HAR files are good at. They basically take the entire state of your dev tools and you can put it in a file and hand it to somebody, and they can load it up, and it will load up the same state in DevTools as the other person experienced. So it'll pull in all the same files, it'll pull in the same, error states. So very, very handy. Something I think definitely more people should know about and use. If you happen to have a product and you support it, it's very handy when collecting customer information for support purposes. A lot of different things you can do with it if you really need to get into the nitty-gritty of things. But a few notes about doing this, if you are going to share it. Do make sure that you maybe go into a guest Chrome window and create your HAR file, because if you don't, there will be potentially some sensitive information from maybe some of your extensions or various things that you have running in the browser that could give information you don't want to get out to somebody. So, and also be careful, if you're actually typing in like your own passwords and stuff like that, because again, it captures all the requests, all the stuff. So make sure you don't put anything that you don't want shared. And with that, I think I hit the mark about right on time. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Yes?
Something that I use just Chromium-based stuff now, but when I use Firefox, something I really enjoyed was the ability to edit and resend an XHR request. Because for the same reasons, right? You're debugging an API, and you're like, oh crap, okay, this meant to do this one little thing. And it's so nice to just be like, oh, backspace, that's what I meant, and it's sent. Do you know if Chromium has that ability?
Well, yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, I'm realizing we're missing a feature. So, I mean, I'm not familiar with any way of editing a XHR request before you retry it. But
so far, I just open up Firefox for that reason.
Yeah.
I don't really have a machine just to do that.
Gotcha. Well, I guess, yeah, if you want to edit and then replay, Firefox is the way to go then, huh? Cool. Any other questions? Okay, yeah. Or comments, yeah.
I guess, I don't know, I was just thinking just the importance of generating source maps. I'm guessing most people's bundlers are just doing things for them and feel that it just magically works, but it doesn't, and so just to make sure, to make all this easier, make sure everyone's generating the source map, otherwise this doesn't work.
Right, yeah. Source maps, yeah, to your point. Yeah, if you don't have source maps being generated and you're trying to do a lot of debugging in the browser, knowing that this CSS rule actually lives in this SAS file, making that connection, that's what those maps are for. So, yeah, good point. All right. Well, thank you very much.